Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Zarina Sani from Deloitte, and
both
for the next
private and
couple of hours,
PSU
I will
banks
be
are
your
here.
host. The format for this discussion is a
Largely
little different
PSU,
from
but,
what you've
a few.
seen in the previous two. It befits the man who's going to be on the stage. He is an author, a great storyteller, and I'm sure all of us follow him here on social media. Please join me in welcoming Shriyal Gopalakrishnan for a fireside chat on the topic of changing paradigms of leadership. He's an author and a speaker, having just released his 19th book. He is an alumnus of IIT Kharagpur and has done an advanced management program at Harvard Business School. He has served as a chairman of Unilever Arabia, MD of Brook Bond Lipton, vice chairman of Hindustan Unilever, and has been on the board of Tata Sons and several other Tata companies. Presently, he serves as an independent director and non-executive chairman of Castrol India and an independent director of Press Trust of India. This session will be steered by Mr. Himanish Chaudhuri, our partner at Deloitte. So if you could please have you on stage.
Jete hue. Okay. Go this way. Thank you. Thank you.
We could also have the moderator on stage, Mr. Himanish, if you could join us on the dais.
Is it audible?
Oh, you don't need that.
Yeah. So, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, first of all, thank you for making time, and obviously it's a privilege to have you here. While this is a fireside chat, or that's the new thing, but we are essentially here to listen to you and your experiences, and hopefully learn from them. So, obviously 19 books, but I guess you have covered a wide variety of industries, sectors in your shaping the business leaders series, and of course you've covered two very, very eminent bankers or people from the financial services industries as well. What do you think the leaders of today need in the current circumstances? And what would be your view on, if I may ask you to kind of focus on what would you think that the leaders of the banks need today?
Well, first, thank you very much for having me over. I'm completely innocent with regard to banking, apart from having an account. And so, my ignorance may show through, and I don't trying to hide it because I've never been in a bank, neither have I been in the finance function in my company. But I believe that the answer to your question, what should leaders be thinking about and doing, goes far beyond having been in banking.
Absolutely.
Whether you're from automobiles, steel, consumer products, software, artificial intelligence, or banking, there is the common raw material for all of them are people.
Yes.
And my short answer, which I'll expand in a moment to your short question, is that's what people should be thinking about. And now let me expand that. And I'm not saying this to please you. I'm told many of you are HR people, if not all of you. But that's not the reason I'm telling you this. This is the reason, this is the finding from my research, which has resulted in the 6 books. 2 of them were on bankers. So I want to tell you the backstory so that you don't think that I've just come here to tell nice things about HR people. And even if I told you, it doesn't matter too much because I'm not the Prime Minister or anybody, so it doesn't really make a difference. After I finished my career, and I'd never been in HR, except in Tata's I was heading the HR function for the group, but it was not in an operational sort of sense, more in a strategic sort of sense. And I got a sense of how to set the compass for strategic HR. I am advisedly using the word I got a sense of. I am not passing off as any expert. And when I retired, I got associated with SP Jain Institute of Management here. And in that association, one day I've never sat in my life with academics over a lunch or a cup of coffee. I've always sat with other business people. So I just said, I wonder what's the difference between a good company and an institution. What is the difference between a good CEO and a shaper of an institution? So 2 words came out. Most of us aspire to be the good CEO of a good company. But there's on the other side, a shaper of a great institution. And I said, what is the difference between the two? I had been lucky that I had worked in 2 companies or groups that can be thought of as institutions. Both were over 100 years old, Hindustan Lever and Unilever and Tata. But I just asked the question because there is academic people who love to get questions, because then they can start doing research and so on. And they said, that's a very good question. There was a lot of chatter. And when I visited again after 1 or 2 months, I got 500 pages on my table. Certain number of people had taken the initiative to produce the best academic papers in talent management, in leadership development, in succession planning, and various such facets. So I said, one of the things I'm untrained for is to deal with 500 pages. How can we get this into 1 page? And of course, they thought this is the trouble with hucksters from the business. How can you get so much knowledge into 1 page? And so the journey began. And to cut a long story short, in a collaborative way, I've never collaborated with academics, by the way. First time. And it's like going to a machhi ka bazaar, each one has an opinion. And that opinion is not easy to change because each one will quote various research. And business people are used to saying, "Acha, theek hai yaar, baat sun liya, abhi karna kya hai?" That's where your instinct is in that direction. As a result of some interactions, some of which developed my patience, and my wife is very grateful that at my old age I've become patient because I've learned to listen to other people. All wives have that complaint about their husband. I converted into 1 page. And I said, the thing about 1 page is, it's like a trailer of a movie. It doesn't tell you what the movie is or the finer points, but does it tell you approximately what the movie is about? Does it stimulate your curiosity? That was my test. And reluctantly, I think they conceded that perhaps it does, but it doesn't really have the weight of knowledge that's available. I then said, we must convert this knowledge that you people have into something that's actionable. And I wrote to 10 CEOs and say that we are researching this subject of what's the difference between a good CEO and a good company, because I'm not writing about bad CEOs and bad companies, there's no point, there are enough other people writing that. Good CEO and a good company with a shaper in an institution. And I wrote a little bit about what those words mean. Of the 10, will you take part in the research? Because you taking part in the research, meaning your company, yourself personally, your top team, and at random we'll pick a few other people, including vendors and customers and so on. And 6 of them agreed to participate. From the other 4, either I got a regret or not suitable timing, etc. And we did this research. This long story is to answer your question. Don't think I've lost track of your question. What the leader should think about, because leaders are meant to shape institutions, not to run a company. So I had to bridge that gap. And 2 of the people who responded positively were Deepak Parekh in HDFC and Uday Kotak in Kotak Mahindra. And just for your information, the others were Ramadurai of TCS, Harsh Mariwala of Marico, Kiran Mazumdar, Biocon, and Anil Nayak of Larsen & Toubro. Then of course we did what you can imagine, and I don't need to go through, define what's an institution, what is a shaper, all those things are there. And we undertook 700 hours of research, because you got 5 of them plus me, 6 people available. We got 700 hours of recordings and notes and so on, which again posed a problem: how do you get it into something digestible? And the central part of the question was, what should be leaders thinking about in the future? And as an example, you, Mr. X, what do you think about? And then checking back. This guy is saying it is this, but is it that? What's the reality out there? And the questionnaire map was this one pager that I had prepared. We arrived at 8. We said there's a mindset, there's a behavior, there's an action. Most people judge actions, but action comes out of behavior, and behavior comes out of mindset. So instead of looking at the Ganga at Allahabad, we wanted to go back to Gangotri. What's in your head? And then we mapped it into that sheet. For each company we produced, of course that we have not published, but the framework we have published. But the book is all about that single map. And what is preoccupying the mind of these shapers? We came to the view that all these 6 companies are institutions. If there are questions, I can answer it, but I don't want to go off into that research. And out of the 700 hours of interviews, we produced a manuscript which is going to be about 1,000 pages. And my publisher said, you're not Ram Guha. Nobody's going to read 1,000 pages coming from you. And I said, I admit that. And we then published it as 6 books. Of only 150 pages each. So instead of a 900-page single book, which looks esoteric, academically sound, and weighty, we said, let's make it easy for somebody to just buy this at the airport, on the flight to Calcutta, he can read it. And I said, the real feeling when the reader finishes is, ispe kaun si badi baat hai? Right. Just like when you watch Virat Kohli hitting a century, itna आसान लगता है ना? And when he misses something, we are all there experts. We can tell him what he did wrong. But when you're standing there, then it's a different game. Now, to the magical moment. I'm not going to go into the other 7. But what do you think was the number 1 item that future leaders will have, which past leaders did very rarely? But these leaders did. People development. They spend between 20 to 35% of their waking time on people. The percentage varied. When I thought of my own career, because one of my roles, I'm not an academic, is having been a CEO of more than one company, I could check back with my own experiences. I said, makes sense. Remember, people development doesn't mean when you sit with the HR head and review biodata. That's not what I mean by people development. I mean, a guy like Deepak Parekh would say, if I'm going to Indore or Nagpur to give a talk or for some government meeting, I would ask my branch manager to meet me at the airport, drive with me, have lunch with me. I will get 3, 4, 5 hours of conversation. Very informal. Deepak, I'm sure many of you know him and know of him. He's a fairly informal sort of guy.
Yes, of course.
There's no shusha around him.
Yes.
No people clicking heels and saying, yes sir, 3 bags full. Uday is also very much in the same mold. But whatever the personal attributes may be, which is not the subject of the discussion, Uday said, I was always interested in finding the best talent for my bank, because I was a startup. By the way, one characteristic of these 6 companies is none of them existed when I began my career. Not one of these 6. Larsen & Toubro existed, but it was a non-entity virtually. It really took off in the 90s. So they've come up under my nose. We are not talking of Tata Steel or Indian Hotels or some of your banks which have been there for 100 years. And the kind of people practices that they followed, some of which are described anecdotally. But the singular point I would like to leave you with is that all of them were obsessed about the people aspect. And that is very different from what any American book will tell you about how to build an institution. If you read American books, very often they are authored by Americans, there's nothing to do with being American. They will have people, but it will be somewhere down the line. It will be cost control, it will be M&A strategy, it will be deployment of IT, what I call the left brain factors of leadership. This is the first time I found the number one item was the right-brained actor of leadership. And that led me to a whole set of other inquiries, which I shall reserve if you have more questions to ask. But many people initially did not believe that this could be true. But when they started to dip into the anecdotes of what you mean by spending 20 to 35% of the time on people, and realize that this is not the HR head, what the HR head can do. HR head can be a help to you, can give you a guidance, a discipline. It's just like a financial officer can tell you how to keep a good, healthy set of books and accounts, but he can't on his own go and run the company, unless you make him the CEO, of course. So if I have to leave you with that thought, I would say that people came first. I should add the second and the third, just so that it's a bit more complete, otherwise I'll leave it all hanging in the air. The second thing that came out of that was critical thinking. Critical thinking is about changing your mindset from what is inside this to what is this a part of. Most of us are trained, especially those who studied, like me, physics and engineering, and I would say include accountants and lawyers also in that, MBAs, to demonstrate that we have a lot of knowledge. And knowledge resides in the left brain. Intuition and feelings reside in the right brain. And critical thinking is the ability to flip. So, I'll just give you an example of that. When we were doing the TCS IPO, there I was physically there, I was right there in the Tata Sons. We took 3 years to decide that. And I used to think, I was new in Tata at that time, कि भाई इतना time लगाता है, क्या है IPO करना है, merchant banker बोलता है इतना मिलेगा, करो, पैसा कमाओ. So it is not that I had these ideas right from the time I was 25. And Ratan Tata would always ask another question. So why do you want to do an IPO? अभी वहाँ चला गया. बोला, merchant banker is saying you get 800 rupees, multiplied by something, something. And then he went off somewhere else. At a fairly advanced stage of the whole process, before the decision was actually taken, we had a director's lunch, and Ratan Tata came, and we were all very happy that day because the merchant banker had made a presentation that the IPO price could be around 950 per share. But if we do one or two more things, it could be 1,000 or even 1,050. And younger people like me were saying, go for it. There's nothing wrong with that. Ratan Tata suddenly turned the question, and this is an example of what I mean by critical thinking. He said, but why do you want all the money for yourself? I said, so boss, if you give me 5 lakh rupees salary, I don't want to say I'll take only 4 lakhs. I want 5 lakhs. If I want, I can get 5.1. He said, don't you think we should leave something on the table? Which is exactly the opposite of what an American book would tell you. Don't leave anything on the table. And finally, we had a discussion on that. I won't go into the detail of that. But his point was, who is trying to get a little richer or wealthier out of this exercise of IPO? Yes, Tata Sons, but shouldn't you leave something on the table for that poor retail shareholder who's probably buying at 100 shares or 500 shares and will augment his or her pension later on? Because TCS IPO, I'm talking from memory, we got about 2 million shareholders out of that. Subsequently, it must have gone up. That gave me the thought that I was thinking, what is in this for me? And he was thinking, but what is this a part of? Because when I've done this, suddenly there'll be, I don't know, 1 million, 2 million people who will also say, I own some shares in TCS. And I give that as an example of critical thinking, of inverting the emulsion. If you have put water into oil, I'll make butter. But if I put butter into water, it will become mayonnaise. If you remember your old chemistry lessons. Mayonnaise and butter are used very differently. And that's what I mean by critical thinking. One other example of critical thinking, I'm sorry, I'm giving you too long an answer, but
No, please go ahead.
Okay?
Please go ahead, absolutely.
It's your fault you asked me the question. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw. I'm going outside banking now so that you can see it has a universal applicability. She got into business through a set of accidents and circumstances, and she was into what is called solid state fermentation. It's a certain technology, Goji technology, G-O-J-I. That was the nature of the technology was such that it had limited use, but you had to do it with great precision. Okay? It is called solid state fermentation. Having established her company, she learned, but if this is solid state, what is not solid state? For lack of a better word, I am using the word wet fermentation. She said, उसमें क्या होता है? I'm dramatizing it a bit. That goes, it's like an ocean. This is like a pukur. You understand a pukur?
Yes,
your friends
pond.
may not. Pukur is a pond. This is like a pond. That's like an ocean. That goes into pharma, health, Then she said, what is my question? Critical thinking. Do I want to be a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big pond? It's a choice. Strategic choice. And she said, I want to be a small fish in a big pond. And you know what she did? She actually sold her solid state business. It's the only business she had. Collected the money and started afresh. And today her business is all based from there, and then of course it goes on to other things. And that is an example. The same question Harsh Mariwala had to attend to. He comes from a family of people who are dealing with coconut oil in bulk. If you didn't do so many tons, it was not worth discussing at family table. I'm exaggerating, but the story is about right. And he came with the idea back in the 70s that he would like to sell it in small plastic bottles because consumers can buy it. Nobody buys a 15 kilos of, unless you're a Malayali, you will not buy 15 kilos of coconut oil and take it home. After discussions, he set out on his adventure. And then he said, how long can I just keep doing coconut oil? ठीक है, थोड़ा perfume डाल दिया, plastic में बड़ा कर दिया, छोटा कर दिया, sachet में डाल दिया. How do I expand my business? And he said, can I become a consumer goods company? If you became a consumer goods company, you'll be taking on Procter & Gamble, Hindustan, Niva, many big companies. Same question. Shall I be a small fish in a big pond or a big fish in a small pond? He said, I cannot be a small fish in a big pond because I'll be meeting sharks like big companies. Kha jayenge. So I will find segments which are too small for the big fellows to be interested in. So he did not get into a shampoo business. He got into medicated shampoo because they have this lice problem with long hair. And now he is a market leader in that. Now, the same question was answered differently. Both are right. So there's no single answer to it. And this is what I mean by critical thinking. And the last one I will mention is Your ability to transform yourself from a short-term thinking, an operator is short-term thinking. This quarter, this year, target pura karo. Long-term thinking is 5 years, 10 years. And there's a transition point in your career which challenges you to make that change, and it's damn tough. I've experienced it. But that was a third attribute. I won't go through the other 5 because that will become too long, but I've given you enough masala to now take the menu forward.
So actually, you have answered one of my follow-up questions.
Okay.
And that's the beauty of, probably having a freewheeling discussion, because at the end of it, a lot of the questions get answered on its own. So we wanted to ask you, how do we train or groom our executives to be visionary leaders? And I guess the answer is obsession with people, critical thinking, and having that long term. But that kind of leads us to another, not a conclusion, but another direction we have from our research. And this is predicated on the work that we do. That increasingly what we are seeing is that the leaders are reluctant decision makers. It can't be more accentuated in banking because you have the regulator, you have, there are massive disruptions. The technology companies are coming in and they want to do things in a different way. Banks are institutions, they have a lot of legacy. So kind of it's becoming this potboiler and maybe that is impeding the ability to take decisions, but there is definitely a challenge in decision making. And how do you kind of leapfrog this issue? How do you kind of navigate this situation today? What would be your perspectives on kind of taking on this problem and becoming more confident, more visionary or long-term decision maker?
You can't just turn on a toggle switch in your brain and then suddenly become this or that.
True.
The quality of the work and the kind of problems that you face and the kind of decisions that you take, depending on you, your function, your vatavaran, and the desired outcome. It's a combination of everything. I'm going to take a metaphor because many of the things I want to say will get self-evident through the metaphor. I had been driving a car in Bombay for 30 years. I had a license. I went to London on a posting and I failed my driving test. It was I'm chairman of the company. I failed a driving test. So thoda ego prick ho gaya. And I asked that Bobby, I said, officer, I've been driving a car for 30 years in India and you failed me in my driving test. How is that possible? And with a stiff British face, he said, sir, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you, but what you have learned is to move the car, but not to drive. And that's what happens to managers.
True.
They've learned to move the car, but not to drive. What's the difference? Doesn't take that much time to say, put the ignition, switch it on and rev it up. That anybody can do. Move it, press the accelerator, it will move. Driving the car means understanding your unique environment and still navigating. So there's no right way of driving. There's an effective way of driving. I once asked Narayan Karthikeyan, Tata Motors was sponsoring Narayan Karthikeyan. I said, don't you feel scared driving at 250 kilometers on the racing track and it's so dangerous to you? He told me in Tamil, he said, sir, I feel scared to drive in Bombay because it's much more dangerous here. There you're fully protected and regulated, You're fully protected. If something happens, the car turns upside down, I'm okay. Here, I feel nanga because if something hits you, you don't know where it's coming from and how it hit you. And that's what you have to understand. Whether you're a regulated industry or a non-regulated industry, it is a traffic condition. So you may be sitting in Kalba Devi and trying to find your way to the airport, and I may be sitting in Malabar Hill trying to find my way to the airport. There are a different set of challenges, but you have to get to the airport.
True.
You can't sit back and say, "Apne aap hi jaane do, let time go." So, what do Bombay taxi drivers teach you? Bombay taxi drivers teach you that when you find a gap, do the best you can. Sometimes it's dangerous to other people, but that's a separate issue. I don't see whether you're a regulated or an unregulated industry, because there's no industry which is unregulated.
True.
That you can shirk from taking your leadership responsibility. That is not an option. Your leadership decisions and pathways may be taken in a context which is different from something else. But what is a leader? The principal job of a leader, by the way, I talked about the HR being the first port of call. Your real job, it doesn't matter which industry you're in, is to develop a person better than yourself.
True.
How many of us do that? How many of us even think it's a part of my job? It's not in anybody's job description.
True.
And we actually feel threatened if there's somebody better than us.
Oh, of course. Yes.
Who's 20 years younger than me. But do I feel threatened when my son is growing up to be taller than me or smarter than me? I couldn't get into Harvard, but he can get into Harvard. And I hope his son gets into whatever is bigger than Harvard. So unless you take the attitude that your principal job is to develop people better than you, you will get the wrong outcome. And I don't think regulation has anything to do with that. That's my humble opinion.
Actually, you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, there are certain constraints within which you have to optimize and navigate, as you said, learn to drive as opposed to move the car.
You can think of it as a constraint or think of it as a reality, which is the challenge that you have.
True.
I can't wish away that a flyover is being built and the traffic is disrupted. If I keep calling it constraint, the language matters a lot in your mind, If I say, I know that there is a flyover being built or something happening there, so I will go half an hour earlier or I will take a different route. That's the way to look at it.
But I mean, just probably, in today's digital age, where you spoke about mindset, behavior, action, right? You are constantly being judged for your action. I mean, the speed at which things are happening. If a system goes down and you're not being able to transact, the customer doesn't wait twice to, all the years of service that you've given kind of goes to dust. Or he just goes into social media and dislikes you or posts a comment. And then, so when all of these things happen, how do you kind of as a leader navigate that? And how does that, doesn't that actually contradict with a lot of the things we would want to do? But actually the circumstances kind of push us in the direction of being more transactional.
It could. So I can't dismiss the problem that you're raising. But at my age, I'm allowed to be a bit philosophical, and allow me to do that. Vedanta tells you, keep your mind still and keep moving your body. But we like to do the opposite. We keep the body still and keep moving our mind. Now, if I'm a yogic person and I tell you, bhai, shanti se karo, you see, this guy doesn't understand, he's a Babaji wearing a saffron robe. But that is the way to solve the problem. Everybody is in a transactional role. There's not a single person, yesterday I went to Pune, day before yesterday. I couldn't see a single coolie at the station. The job of a coolie is gone. Even women have got strollers with them. Their job's gone. And we all know that several jobs are vanishing. So the world has a sigma transactions equal to the long-term development of the world.
True.
Internet did not happen by itself one fine day. Internet happened because A, B, C, D, and somebody connected those dots together and created internet. And he is the first guy who says, please don't credit me with inventing the internet. I took 10, 20 other people's internet and stitched it together. All of us are common people. Most of us are doing that. Although we may think we are a genius who deserves to be the next whatever general manager or MD or whatever. So my experience tells me that it is the way you look at the object rather than the object itself. And one of the books I've written is 6 lenses. If you change your lens, you get a very different perspective. I'm looking at you now. You look like a handsome young man.
Oh, I'm neither handsome nor young, but I'll take that.
But if I looked at you through X-ray, you know how you will look?
I'll look the same as the handsome young man, that I can tell you.
So the frequency of the light with which I look at you. So if I look at it as a constraint, if I look at it as that I'm accountable, if I look at it that I'm going to be chopped on the head, everybody in the world is in the same situation, including I might add your MD and CEO. I've written a book on how MDs and CEOs get fired. So don't think that he's got a cushy job and I'm the poor fellow deputy general manager who's getting screwed.
Not at all. Not at all.
Right?
So, I mean, we have some time and I would want you to specifically focus on this people obsession, right? In this fast-paced or relatively fast-paced world where technology is there and there are probably more moving components, not that it was not there earlier. What are the 2 or 3 things that is the cornerstone of that people obsession? Is people obsession mentoring people? Is people obsession finding that guy who's better than you, or is it much more connecting? What is it that you would want to classify as people obsession?
I can, again, the purpose here is to share experiences. Yes. And I'll use some unusual words because that's been my experience. Affection and compassion. In no leadership book will you find those 2 words used. You will find people engagement and people positivity, all the mumbo jumbo, which is all valid, by the way, I'm not dismissing it. But affection and compassion. And I love those 2 for reasons, if you wish, if there's time, I can explain.
Absolutely.
J.R.D. Tata was the person who, he said, I want affectionate leaders. He said this when he was alive. Okay? Mm-hmm. And I've often thought to myself, what's an affectionate leader? Mm-hmm. I can't come every morning and say, hello, how are you, tick, tick, tick. That's not affection. And I found an episode which told me what's an affectionate leader in a practical sort of way. And this episode is not available in the Tata archives, it's not available in the Lala books, it's available in A.D. Shroff Memorial Archives. So I had to get it from somewhere else. 1951. J.R.D. Tata is under 50 years of age. He's 47 or something. He's got a bunch of tigers around him in the boardroom. I think that's well recorded and documented. One of them is A.D. Shroff. A.D. Shroff is the finance minister India never had. Nani Palkhiwala was the second finance minister whom India never had. Both stalwarts. Some subject came up in the board meeting, 1951, before corporate governance and mumbo jumbo like that. A.D. Shroff made some point. A.D. Shroff is, I didn't know him, was reported to be a bit tikha, cut and dry. He said, but J.R.D. Tata said that would be a dishonest argument. And the subject moved on. A.D. Shroff went back. He's a director, this is the chairman. He wrote him a letter, which I've seen, and I've got a copy with me. I've got the wording. He said, my dear Jay, you called me a dishonest person, and it's not possible for me to stay on as a director of Tata Sons. Second, I understand that your name is on the nameplate outside, the brass plate outside the building. So you have a right to do what you like, but I also have the right to go out when I feel like. Tikha hai. But it's been a great pleasure. I wish you well. Adi. Now, if I had received such a letter, I don't know what would have happened in my mind. Fix the guy, transfer him, charge sheet him, I don't know. Coolness would have come to me. What did J.R.D. Tata do? And this to me represents affection. He said, my dear Adi, I have read your letter and felt sad. देखो इंसानियत निकल आता है. Huh? Firstly, you say that I called you dishonest. May I correct you? I called your argument dishonest. The fact, we all make dishonest arguments once in a while. The fact that I called your argument dishonest doesn't make you dishonest. I hope you understand that. Point number 2. You refer to my name on the brass plate outside. As you well know, I own less than 0.5% of the shares of this company. This is our company. And to regard it as my company is something that's not even in my mind. It should never be in your mind. Last point. The trouble really is, Adi, that you and I both have a short fuse. And we should learn to manage it. Can we put this behind and help each other? If that's not affection in business, what is affection?
True, true.
So affection is a very important part, and compassion is my second. I won't elaborate on that. You can imagine that I have lots of stories to tell you at our dinner, your lunch, or whatever happens next. Or my friend is here, Vaidyanathan is here, so he'll be waiting too long.
I think, just summarizing, it's been, I wish we had more time. It can, this, I think, especially in the corporate world, I think we have lost the art of, or we are losing the art of storytelling. And it is when we have the opportunity to have conversations like this, we really learn how things have been built over time. What we have today is because somebody built it yesterday and day before, and it's for us to take it ahead.
Without damaging it. When I first came to Tata's, I came from a marketing background, levers, and they had done some valuation exercise. This valuation puri bhaji happens, it's part of the financial banking world, and they had valued the Tata brand at $386 million. This is 1997. Various things were done, but today it's valued at 26 billion. That's refining the valuation technique. It's also comparing it with others, etc. If I think I have created that, I must be nuts.
True.
I had the opportunity to screw it up.
True.
I happily retired saying, इस अमानत पे हमने हाथ रखा, लेकिन इसका कुछ, I didn't do any damage to it. That is the spirit that brings the idea of affectionate leaders, compassionate leaders, that you got a bank which is 100 years old, Central Bank. I mean, I'm just taking a name. I think Central Bank is over 100 years old, as far as I am aware. You're getting a chance to touch it. You can't let it get screwed up. So just keep it moving. Thank you.
So, in conclusion, again, thank you so much for your time. But the one line that I'm going to personally take back from this interaction is not look at what is inside, but what is it a part of. And I think as from this entire, in this audience, all of us, when we go back to work, that's probably something that's I'm going to rerun it in my head, and I hope that all of you have similar snippets from this conversation that you will take back home too. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, sir. And,
I didn't know if I'll survive being with so many bankers in one room, but it seems I'll get out unhurt.
I think what Himanish mentioned, I think for a lot of us, it will be the driving in the movement that will stay back for most of us. But thank you so much for this session. May I request Shri Gopal Murli Bhagat, Deputy Chief Executive, Indian Banks Association, to felicitate sir with the memento.
Hi.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are halfway through the day. We will break for lunch. Immediately after this, we have an interactive session where I'm hoping a lot of you would pose questions that are difficult to everybody here. So please do come back. We'll ring the bell about 45 minutes from now. We'll have you back in the room as well.